tough luck. You contracted with the wrong people. And that happened. But some of the early days of those fire departments is a little confusing, even here in St. Louis, even though it's kind of a short span of time, about 10 or 12 years, that there may have been a couple of fire departments. And along with that, we also had the Wawa Sums. And the Wawa Sums was kind of a youth group fire department. This was young men approximately 16 to 20 years of age, and it was a competition department, so to speak. Their thing was to travel around, take the hand pumper, and beat the socks off everybody else they could in pumping competitions, in tugs of war, whatever competition was going on that they could compete in and give St. Louis a good name among fire departments. Now, you're all interested in Historical Society. Historical Society has lots of artifacts. I like artifacts, especially those pertaining to fire. This lovely little cup says, St. Louis Cup Tug of War. It doesn't say anything about fire department, but tug of war was a very common competition among fire departments in the late 1800s, even in the early 1900s. And so I'm pretty well convinced that was a fire department trophy. Was it for a competition in St. Louis, or was it a cup that St. Louis bought and took to a competition and won it back? I don't know. Helen Hall owned this, and when she had an auction a few years ago, it was in sale. I wanted it desperately. Bad news was I couldn't go to the sale. I had to work. So I said to Sally Church, Sally, will you bid for me? How much do you want me to bid? I told her how high I'd go. I'm cheap. I didn't get it. I was heartbroken, but you know, you live without it. About 3 years later, we were in a local antique shop, wandering through, and there in a locked case stood this lovely cup for the tug of war. And I said, you know what? It doesn't matter what it costs. I'm taking it home. Still being cheap, though, I went to the proprietor and said, you have an old silver cup back there in the case. Which one? Told him. How much is it? He told me. I said, can you do better? He quoted the price. I told Sally I'd pay for it. So I brought it home. One of these days, I suppose that has to be donated to the fire department, but I'm guarding it desperately at home at this time. But competition was a big thing in the fire departments, and who could beat the other guy in friendly competition went a long ways. You stood pretty tall on that. And the Wawa Sums represented St. Louis pretty well for a number of years. So we've hit, so far, the fire wardens, Citizens Engine Company, Citizens Hose Company, Wawa Sums, St. Louis Fire Department. There's one more department, Mid-Michigan Community Fire Department. How many of you have heard of it? A few of you, okay. We have our trucks garaged right over here. We used to be the St. Louis Fire Department. In 1981, the city and the 3 townships that we provide fire protection to entered into an agreement where they all became joint owners of the fire department, and it was renamed Mid-Michigan Community Fire Department. And so I didn't talk about the fire department. We talked about 5 of them. Over the years, the department has grown from 3 fire wardens to today we have 25 members. And when you go back to the early days of the fire department and look at the history of the members, nearly all of them were businessmen here in town. They were members of the Presbyterian Church, the Methodist Church, the Masons, the Odd Fellows, modern woodmen or foresters of America. Many of them were Civil War veterans. Some of them were politicians. But they tended to be very much the professional people of the community who were on the fire department. Today we don't find a lot of professional people, but we find a lot of guys that have a lot of fun being a part of the fire department, providing a service to the community. And we have an age range from about 19 to an age of 60. We have people who have served as little as 4 months, up to as much as 33 years actively involved with the fire department. And so we have a pretty good representation of experience and training that we have there. But you want to know more about fires. You're all familiar with Yerington's College, that great big old building that stood up here by the mill pond. You know, if you're in an antique shop flipping through photographs, if one comes up with St. Louis with the Urington's College, it will just scream at you. Well, the Urington's College was considerably damaged by fire in 1899. Good news was it was repaired and restored and still here. Bad news is they tore it down before I got to town. One of the tragic fires in town was back in 1948 with an explosion and fire at Rowley Church Service Station down here on Main Street, which was raised just a few years ago, and that fire resulted in 2 fatalities. The IGA fire. Larry, would you like to tell us about the IGA fire? Jerry?
You're doing a good job.
You guys were there.
All we can say was it was cold.
It was cold. January 24th, 1970.
Yes, sir. Well, I'll tell you, Caroline here, I fought fire there, and I had ice on me that thick, and I couldn't take my clothes off. So Carolyn stood out in the middle of the street and pounded out the ice off for me. But it was really...
And got your pair of long johns.
Yeah, and got me a pair of long johns.
That was probably one of the coldest downtown fires that I have ever heard of in St. Louis. If you've seen pictures of that, you see inches and inches of fire build up on hoses, on apparatus, on structures, and on people. Dave, I think you were involved in that, weren't you, as a firefighter? Dave was on the Alma Fire Department, and they were very much involved in that. That fire left 60 people homeless and a couple of injuries, and was there one fatality in that fire? Or not? Okay, there were 2 injuries, and 60 people left homeless. It took the IGA and 2 other buildings down. So there have been some big fires around town in not too distant future. 1971, show and tell time. How many of you remember Thayer's Drugstore? I don't. It was gone before I got here. Big fire. After Bernard Leahy passed away, his daughter gave me some pictures and things that Bernard had. In there, there was a box of slides that were all pictures from the fire at Thayer's Drugstore. And interesting coincidence, the fire department had been out on a training session that morning, I believe a Sunday morning. Early training, they came back and they were cleaning equipment, putting things back in service. And one of the young firefighters went out and came back in a minute later, and Larry said,
Thayer's Drugstore's on fire.
And he turned in the alarm on that one. That was probably pretty much an all-day fire. Large building. These will be up here if you care to look at them. But Country Pharmacy came in there later on, site of the dollar store today. The Royster Warehouse fire. This one isn't blown up too big, but I think you can tell there's a lot of fire there, and there's a man standing in front of it. I'm not sure what he's doing, because I do know we didn't have enough hoses or big enough hoses for that. We had about every fire department in Gratiot County here. We had Shepherd Fire Department was here. Was Vestaburg in on that?
I don't know about that.
I don't remember, but we had about everybody. And we kind of spent the night there and part of the next day. But this was taken by one of the Riker boys, Mike and Mary's sons, and they were kind enough to let me have their negatives and get some prints off it. But they had the time to wander around, take pictures. The rest of us were kind of busy.
Wow.
That fire, or that was the Bear Trust fire, I'm sorry, not the Royster fire. The Royster fire was a year prior to that. That was a fairly simple fire to deal with because it involved agricultural chemicals. And so we blocked off the road. The prison went into lockdown. Some people evacuated, and we kind of got back out of the way until it had burned down, and